Welcome, everyone. It's nice to have you guys joining us today. My name is Janell Reeves. I'm the Center Director at the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center in Magnolia. And as Florence was saying, we're part of a bigger network that stretches across the state of Arkansas and an even larger network that covers the United States. So no matter where you're watching this presentation from, there's an SBDC that serves your area. So as long as you're in the United States or in one of the territories, we're there. My background and why I come to you talking to you about human resources today, I spent several years as a human resource manager in a couple of different companies, and it is one of the hats that small business owners need to wear. A lot of times we, as small business owners, tend to get caught up in the day-to-day, figuring out how to sell a product, how to market a product, how to price a product. And all those are very important parts of a small business. But a good human resource foundation is very important to the success of your team. And doing it in the beginning and doing it right is what's going to help you as you get poised for growth. Okay. So in corporate, when I was in corporate, one of the things that we always talked about was succession planning. There was always this talk about, okay, so what's your succession plan? You may start with just one employee, maybe two employees, but if you can get those folks in and get them trained right, get them trained well, they're going to turn into your managers at the next level. But you've got to make sure that your business is a place they enjoy working, that they're engaged, and so forth and so on. So we're going to cover some of that type of things, those topics today. So let me see if I can get this slide to advance. There we go. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is why is it important? And I've already kind of briefly touched on that, but let's go into it a little deeper. Creating an HR process early on ensures compliance. So I haven't talked about the compliance part yet. It's going to minimize your risk, and it's going to foster that positive company culture that's going to poise you for growth. Okay, so we're going to go into these. We've got a checklist to look at. And the compliance one is one that I need to speak to as we kind of dive into that. One of the things that we do not do at the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center is give legal advice, okay? Human resources can sometimes, more often than not, you're going to have a little bit of a toe in that legal field. And so at that point is where I'm going to tell you, well, you need to speak to your legal counsel on that. And I always tell people that legal counsel is not created equal, only meaning that some attorneys specialize in estate planning. Some specialize maybe in family law. You need one who is a specialist in business practices, and there are those that solely focus on human resources. So just depending on the level of complexity of your organization, what stage you're at, but I do say whoever is your legal representation, you can always ask them, who would you recommend to handle the human resources legal portion of my business? If they're not comfortable doing it, they should have someone in their Rolodex that they can share with you to give you guidance in that area. Okay, so let's talk about the basics of HR. Often we hear the term HR, so we know that's human resources. And in big companies, and even in medium-sized companies, there's often an HR individual or maybe even an entire department, but that's not necessarily the case in a small business. More often than not, it's the owner who is assuming this role. So you're responsible for managing your employees. You're going to handle recruiting, hiring, and onboarding of new employees. And then you're going to enforce company policies and ensure compliance with employment law. Well, how can you do that if you don't know what that information is? So with the first one, it's typical of any management position, right? You need to have a good relationship with your employees, have a good company culture. With the second one there, where it talks about recruiting, hiring, and onboarding, even if you don't have an employee yet, these are things that cost you no money to start developing a policy. It costs you no money to plan. So you can start planning for the day when that comes. Let's say you have 3 employees and you already have job descriptions for them. You've gone through onboarding. Okay, you're getting ready to hire a 4th, or someday you're hoping to hire a 4th. Now's the time to go ahead and start developing that job description. What would they be doing? Who would they report to? What makes sense for your organization? Now, in recruiting, a lot of times people want to just post an ad, and it kind of tickles me because I see this on both sides. I see employees who think that the company's just begging them to come to work. And then I see companies who think the employees are begging to come to work. And at the end of the day, that you wonder why there's a little dysfunction in an organization. Recruiting, that's where it all starts. Okay. So when you're recruiting your employees, where are you recruiting them? Okay. If you're looking for someone who'll sit behind the scenes and sit on a computer all day and is happy doing that, then think about where those people where would you find them? Where would you find them online? Where would you find them in person? Where would you find them? Should you advertise in the paper? You got to think about who you're trying to reach as part of that recruiting. Meet them where they are, where the type of employee you want is. If you need someone who's a big face-to-face salesperson, putting a ad on some type of database that you really have to dig to kind of find, you may not get that person because they're such an outgoing people person that are they really going to spend enough time going through a database looking for your little ad that's in there? So think about the type of person that you're looking to recruit. Not only what their skill sets are, but an aptitude to learn. Are they driven? So think outside the box a little bit on the type of person that you're looking for, and then think about where can I find them as part of that recruiting process. Then the making of the decision, that's the hiring decision. Keep it consistent. Make sure the questions you ask candidate A are the same questions that you ask candidate B, and stay off of the questions that are prohibited by federal law. And you can find those on web pages. Those are an easy Google search. You don't want to violate any law with asking questions of a personal nature, such as how many children do you have, or are you married, or what is your religion? So make sure it doesn't matter how big of a company you are, you need to stay off of those questions. Then when it comes to onboarding, okay, so this is one of those where you're really setting the tone because they're watching you to determine information about your company. So if you tell them, all right, be here at 2:00, we're going to do your onboarding, and you don't show up until 2:30, they're going to get the impression that timeliness is not of big importance to your company. If they sit down at the onboarding table and there's papers stacked up, things are kind of in disarray, they're going to get the impression that neatness may not be such a big deal to your company. So think of those things in that onboarding process. Have it a structured onboarding process. This helps you make sure that you cover all of your bases. Okay, and then human resources is going to enforce company policies and ensure compliance with employment law. This is where that attorney can come in. You can call the Fair Labor Relations Board. You can call EEOC and get guidance. They have small business resources and get guidance from them, especially of general guidance. They have areas on their websites that are specifically dedicated to small businesses. So take advantage of those online resources, educate yourself as much as possible so that when you call that attorney, you may have 1 or 2 questions. And that's, if you can keep that meeting short, that saves you money as opposed to going in and expect them to totally train you in human resource law. Okay. So let's talk about some key human resource policies and procedures. One of the things that you want to set out in your policies and procedures is what is your company's mission, what is your vision, and what are your values? What is important to you? So this is one of those things that it can be a task in and of itself if you've never done it. Now, I will tell you, this is a great place to let AI be your friend. Okay. So artificial intelligence, something like ChatGPT, you can put into the request, write a mission statement for a small boutique that specializes in children's clothing, and it'll spit you something out. And then if you're like, oh, that's 3 paragraphs, a mission statement doesn't need to be that long, tell it, just write back down in the search, tell it, make it shorter. It'll shorten it down for you. If it's still too long, tell it, make it 1 sentence, and it'll keep condensing it. If they put something in there, for example, using my example here of a children's boutique, let's say that they include the word vibrant, and you're like, vibrant? And that just really doesn't fit the aesthetic of my boutique. My boutique is more of a warm, fuzzy, cuddly type place. Then all you have to do is type into the communication bar there where you're communicating with ChatGPT and say, remove the word vibrant or reword without the word vibrant, and it'll spit it back out to you. AI, let me just tell you this, AI, never put any of your personal information in there. Don't put your business address in there, your business name, anything like that, because once it takes that information in, it doesn't forget it, and we're not really sure how it uses it. And by we, I mean the tech world, right? We as a society aren't sure how it's going to use it. So don't put any personal information in there. The other thing about AI is sometimes it just gives you a good start. Okay, so when it finishes doing its thing, if you're not happy with the outcome, use it more as a kind of to break the writer's block, right? So then you can go in and take what it has laid out as a format and make it your own. Okay, so it does take something and can specialize it to the type of business that you have. Use that for your mission, your vision, and then for your values, you can use it there, but your values are really going to be tailored to you and what your company stands for. So I'm not sure how much help that's going to be, except, like I said, maybe to kind of give you a template. Okay, now this next one, you can also use AI for, but that's just the starting point, okay? AI would just be a good starting point, and then make it your own. You need to have clear job descriptions. So this is good for you as the owner and manager, what you expect from your employees, and then it's good for the employee to be able to see what is expected of them. It is a written form of communication with your employee. Performance expectations. A lot of companies, small businesses, don't bother with performance reviews. When I was in private industry, we did them at least annually. And then sometimes, you know, on the advice of human resources, we would tell someone, hey, look, why don't you go into your supervisor and ask them for a pulse check? So maybe their review wasn't that great, but they're not bad enough to be on an improvement plan. Okay, well, after 3 months, go back into your supervisor and say, hey, I just want to come in and kind of do a pulse check. How is my performance doing? That way you don't have to wait a whole year. And the same goes in your small business. If you decide that you're going to give them a written performance review once a year, and that's not a bad practice, but it doesn't need to stop at that. You need to have performance feedback opportunities all, year round, so that you can kind of say, hey, look, you've been doing a wonderful job. Keep up the good work. Or, hey, look, you haven't been quite carrying the load in this area. And so I want to talk to you and have a conversation about that and what we can do to get that fixed. Then the feedback mechanisms is kind of that whole cycle, right? So it may be that the manager actively approaches employees or the owner and says, okay, I want to have a conversation about work performance. What questions do you have for me? Or maybe it's simply that you set up a climate that's very open to them approaching you, whether it's, an onboarding. Maybe in onboarding, you tell them, look, if you have any questions for me about performance, bring them to me at 4:00 in the afternoon. I'll make sure I'm available and have some time on my calendar, on my schedule to visit with anyone that's got an employee question or performance question every afternoon after 4. Maybe it's Mondays are the day. We're going to do it every Monday. But if you'll set the tone that they can come to you, they're more likely to than if you seem to be someone who's locked in your office all the time and just not available. And then you have to develop policies for discrimination, harassment, and workplace safety. Now, this is where you're going to want to get OSHA requirements. You're going to want to look at what the laws are for discrimination. You're going to want to look at what constitutes harassment. And in all of these, you need to make sure you have a training component, okay? A required training component where they can either you make videos available to them, you make written. Remember, people, they take in information in different ways, right? So a video may be great for one person, but someone else might prefer to see it written and may learn better by reading. Okay, so just remember that you want to make that training something that maybe you push out once a year and they sign off that they watched it, or maybe it's something that they go out and get, and in doing so, you can capture who watched it and when, and make sure it's being viewed. Okay. All right, let's move to the next one. All right, so let's talk about the recruitment and retention strategies. I've already talked a little bit about the recruitment, but this is another one of those hats that HR wears, or you as a business owner wear. And it all begins, like I said, in the recruiting process, finding people who have the skill sets that you're looking for. So you've developed your job description, so you have that. And now what skill sets do I need? Do I need someone who prefers to work alone? Do I need someone who's great in a group environment? Is this someone who's going to be working with customers, or is this someone who's going to be behind the scenes? And getting that right fit. Then the next thing we want to talk about is retaining them. And the best way to retain them is to invest in their development. Some of that training I was just talking to you about, as you develop the training for the legal requirements, then you can turn around and also put training in there for the more, what should we call them, core competencies maybe? Maybe some leadership training could go in there. Maybe some customer service training could go in there. Handling a difficult customer, that type of training could go in there. And they could also get those on demand. And I'm not here to promote any one service, but there are services out there that you can subscribe to. You could probably find some good videos just doing a basic internet search that were shareable to your team. And then you could use those and build your database that way. You're going to want to make sure that you're offering competitive compensation and benefits. And look, I want you to remember that benefits is more about, it doesn't have to be money, right? It doesn't have to be health care. It doesn't have to be paid holiday. Well, you got to do paid holidays, but paid sick time or paid vacation, like 6 weeks of vacation. We'd all love that, right? Benefits can be simply something as simple as allowing them to have a little structure in their in deciding what their schedule is. You know, maybe they, instead of you just dictating what the schedule is going to be, if they have a child they need to drop off at school, maybe they would like to start their day at 9 o'clock and work, you know, to a different time. The ability to switch schedules with people. How hard do you make that for them versus is it pretty simple? Look, to me, it's a benefit that I get to come to a job every day where I like the atmosphere. It could be something as easy as making sure you have a clean, uncluttered workspace. Maybe it's something where they're making, let's say they're making pizzas as their job. And you have in your mind, well, they should have these recipes memorized. Well, for someone who's new, that's going to be a pretty tall order. So maybe it's something as simple as making sure that your most popular recipes are easily available for them to look at. So just think outside of that whole, what we consider a traditional benefit package. Think about, what can I offer my employees? You know, we talk about it, what differentiates you from your customers, from your competition, what differentiates you from your competition? What is your unique point of reference, right? Well, the same thing, let's apply that principle to our employees. What makes me a better employer than my competition down the street? What makes me more desirable to work for? And in that way, retain our good employees and hopefully attract new ones that are also looking for that nice place to work. And that kind of flows into fostering a positive work culture. There's, in any organization, there's some organizations you'll hear the term they're just dysfunctional. And that doesn't have to be a small business. It could be a club or something. They're just dysfunctional. And people, those, when they're dysfunctional like that, they tend to get smaller and smaller because people just don't like to come and involve themselves on a day-to-day basis with conflict. So making sure that you have a good, positive work environment. And then providing recognition. And then we've already talked about that feedback. Now let's talk about recognition for a second. Recognition, some people, there's different ways, right, of providing recognition. Some people would love to see their name painted by a airplane in the sky as a type of recognition. Others would like to see a gift card to their favorite restaurant or their favorite spa, or maybe tickets to a ball game. This comes to knowing your employees. What do they enjoy doing? What's important to them? And then you can put your recognition, if you want to do it in a monetary way, you can design something that's attractive to them. But look, saying thank you is recognition. Thanking an employee. Hey, I know that customer right there, that was a difficult situation you just handled. Thank you for keeping your professionalism and keeping your cool. You did a great job. That is recognition. In front of the team, pointing out, yesterday, Susan had a really difficult customer and she did a great job in handling that. And I just want to take a moment to recognize that in front of the team. That's recognition. A written thank you card is recognition. So don't think it has to be the airplane writing their name in the sky. Some people don't want that at all. They'd rather it be quieter. Again, knowing your employees. But here's an idea. If you go ahead and get you a list of 10 ways to recognize employees, hey, if you don't have that, let AI generate it for you. Maybe you tell AI, create me 10 ways to recognize employees for $10 or less if you have a budget that you're working with that's in that range. And then use those, pick the ones that work for you, put in the ones that you've come up with, and you should end up with a pretty nice list of options. So that what you don't want to happen, what you don't want to have happen is someone did a great job today. And now I got to think about, how can I recognize them for that? And then it's a week down the road before you've ever come up with a way to recognize them. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Get your list put together first and then choose an appropriate response on your list. You'll already have it in place. If it's thank you cards, you'll already have your thank you cards purchased so that it can be timely. Giving recognition once a year at a banquet and big companies, that's not bad. But for a small team, especially if you have a group of employees that have like some turnover. So some small businesses, it's constant, like restaurants, you have new servers you're hiring all the time. If you wait till a year to recognize who's done what well, and that's the only recognition you have, I'll use the term, it's stale, right? It's stale recognition. Those employees may not even be with you anymore. Other employees notice what their coworker got recognized for, so capitalize on it, shall we say, in the moment. Make sure that it is timely.
Awesome. This is great information and really exciting. Would this be a good point to ask questions, or do I wait till the end?
If you would wait to the end, that way the recording can be fluid whenever we post it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So let's talk about employee training and development. Provide your new employees with an orientation to your company's culture and values, not just here's how you do your job. They need that. They need to know here's what time you show up for work. Here's what time you clock out. Here's where you clock in, clock out. But there's so much more that you're going to want to communicate. Okay. So providing your new employees not only with those detailed list of how to do the job, but introduce them to your company's culture and values. And that's for example, when I talked about how open are you to feedback, how open are you as their manager or their business owner to hearing from them. This is the time that you set the tone for that, is in orientation. Then conduct those regular training sessions to keep their skills and knowledge up to date. And I've already talked about how you can kind of push that out to them using videos, but you can make it even more personal if you lead those discussions or have a way that they circle back. Something that we do where I work, and it's not employee training, it's kind of a development, but we have a book club. Okay. And so we read the book, and then 6 weeks down the line, we all can come together and just discuss how the book, what we thought about the book. 30 minutes to an hour. If you have 5 or 6 employees, watch a leadership video and then circle back and put what was important to you as the business owner in that video. What did you want to make sure that they grabbed hold of? And then encourage them to take on new challenges and responsibilities as part of their professional development. Look, you're going to have employees sometimes that you're like, that employee has so much potential, but they just don't have the desire. So some people are really good at cultivating the desire in someone to do something. So, I mean, if you told them, I'm going to give you a $50 an hour raise, that's probably going to cultivate the desire. But that, of course, would be a little outlandish to do for someone, just to try to get them to invest in leadership training. But if they'll accept you, they need to know it's okay with you as the business owner or the manager that they try something new, that it's okay for you not to just do what's in your job description. That's something I've heard my whole career. Well, that's not my job description. You could set that tone at the very beginning. If it's not in your job description, it's still okay for you to do that. We kind of set it on the other end in our job descriptions where we say other duties as assigned. So we're basically saying we're going to give you what we want you to when we need you to do it. But let them also take the initiative to learn something on the other side within reasonable boundaries. Of course, I'm not suggesting someone go draw blood that's never been trained to draw blood, but there are new challenges and responsibilities at every workplace that if an employee expresses an interest in it, then you as the owner be like, oh, well, let me get you trained in that, because the more folks that know how to do that particular task, the more effective we are. Okay, so this is another piece of that feedback that we're talking about. Making sure that they're engaged and that they are satisfied. So some of the ways to do this is involving them in decision making. Haven't really touched on that a whole lot, but I don't mean the little things, right? I don't mean just, oh, let's decide today. Every morning we're going to get together and decide who's going to do what. Who's going to sweep the floor, who's going to take the money, and who's going to this, that, and the other. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is more of a culture of input. Now, back when I was doing some of my education, the term of brainstorming session was very popular. And we've used that in work career. They've kind of changed it up a little bit, and they're not really calling it a brainstorming session anymore. But it was basically where no idea is a bad idea. Just throw them all out there, and then we'll organize them and put together something that looks like a workable solution. Again, some of your employees have the best ideas for how to correct a problem or how maybe a new product that you should offer, because they're the ones that are, they're the front line with your customers. They're hearing from your customers. They know what they're happy with. They know what their pain points are. So it's just good business to get your employees involved in some of the decision making that you have to do for the business. Maybe they're not the ones who are setting the price. That kind of falls to you as the business owner for the product or service. but they could certainly give you feedback on what offerings the customers are interested in, and just make that a part of your culture so that they know if they have an idea, come run it by me. Maybe you have a suggestion box. To me, a suggestion box is a little informal. I mean, a little, I hate to say off-putting, because I guess it's better than nothing, but it's just not real personal. So being able to talk to someone in person about it, but you as the owner or manager, you need to make sure that you jot those ideas down, because a fire is going to come up, right? There's going to be something you have to take care of that's super important, very urgent, and you're likely to forget what that suggestion was, and that can make an employee feel devalued later if you've totally forgotten their suggestion. So be mindful when you get suggestions from employees, and jot them down. Keep them somewhere that you can reflect back on them when it comes time to make a decision about something. We've already talked about recognizing their achievements and fostering that positive work culture. But here's the thing to remember. Happy employees are productive employees. That doesn't mean that we have to be jumping around, giggling and laughing all the time. But if they're happy with what they're doing, and they feel respected, and they have a good work environment, and they have your support as their manager and the business owner, they're more likely to be productive employees. And that translates into dollars at the bottom line. So what about when you get that, we're going to call it constructive criticism, that critical remark from an employee, or you've got two of them that they're just not getting along, and so we've got a problem, right? One of the first things you want to do is to encourage the open communication between employees. So don't start this, well, come in here and tell me what happened, and then run over to that one and say, well, I heard you had a problem with so-and-so yesterday. What was going on? No, bring those employees in, sit them down with each other, and understand there was a little disagreement yesterday. I'd like us to talk through that. Make it a constructive conversation that is solution-driven. You're looking for solutions. Actively listen to all parties involved in the conflict. And let me give you something for you to try later, because I do this quite often with students when I'm in a class. Get you a partner and get you a weight of time, some type of timer. Ask that partner a simple question such as, so what do you think about summer? Do you prefer it to fall? And then start your timer and wait 1 minute before that person responds. The first time you do this, that minute's going to seem like an eternity. But then have them ask you a question back and time that minute, and it will get a little shorter. So that awkward silence, we're not really good with silence sometimes. And when you're needing to listen to a party that's in a conflict, you need to give them the time to formulate how they want to respond to your question without planting an answer in their head. So I asked Bill, well, Bill, tell me what happened in the break room yesterday. And then if I don't wait, if I only wait like 10 seconds, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess Bill's not going to answer me. So I'm going to say, well, George said that this has happened. Well, you've just, shall we use the term, tainted your witness? You've just planted a whole scenario in their mind that might not have been what they observed at all. So now if they say, no, that's not what happened, it's like they're calling George a liar or saying he misrepresented things. So practice that listening. Give them time to give a well thought out response. And then if they need more time, instead of trying to feed them an answer, just ask them, would you like a little more time to come up with a response for that? Would you like to get back with me? Is now a bad time? We can come back in an hour and talk about it, but we are going to talk about it. And then utilizing a step-by-step conflict resolution process. Does that sound like something you want to be developing in the middle of a conflict? No, you want to have that developed prior to a problem happening. It takes a lot of that emotion out of even your role as a manager, okay? It takes that emotional part out into where you can get down to let's just talk about facts and look for solutions instead of, well, I'm sorry it made you feel, or how did that make you feel? Or, you want to get it down to exactly what happened and come up with a good solution. So it could include things like identifying what the problem was, and that's where those listening skills really are going to be valuable to you. Then discussing those possible solutions. And sometimes the manager has to say, this is how it's going to be solved. But this is another place where if you can involve those 2 employees or 3, whatever it is, in coming up with a solution, you're going to get better buy-in. Okay, you get better buy-in, and there'll be a greater chance that the solution that you come up with will be implemented and it'll stick. And so that's where we say agreeing on that plan of action. You want buy-in, you need commitment from the employees that that's the way we're going to move forward. And then that's kind of back to the feedback. You as a manager need to circle back from time to time and make sure that that new process is working. If it's not working, then you kind of sit down and have another session. Well, let's talk about what's not working and how we can revise it. If it is working, then that's great. And then you check back again in a few weeks if that's the time period that it warrants, and just make sure everything's okay with everybody. And then you can kind of put it behind you. Once the new processes are in place, they're being followed, and that conflict has been resolved. Now, here's the company culture. Let me give you a little bit on the company culture. You have to be intentional. Doing it in onboarding and just, okay, I did it, check that box. That's not going to be enough to sustain it, and you want to sustain it. You've put all this hard work into making sure that you've thought out the culture you want, that you've invested in the culture you want, but you have to maintain that positive company culture. Look, especially in a diverse team, and we all know the value of diversity in our teams. If we get a bunch of folks who think exactly the same and have the exact same skill set, that doesn't make for a well-rounded company. You want a diverse team, and so of course you're going to have some personalities that are going to conflict, and you're going to have different ways. I always say 1 + 3 = 4, just like 2 + 2 = 4. So you need to consider, well, we've been doing 1 + 3, but maybe 2 + 2 would actually be more efficient or be less costly to us. So in the diverse teams, you've got to make sure that you're intentional about keeping and maintaining that, about creating and maintaining that positive company culture. Prioritize inclusivity and equity by making sure that it's not just a blurb in your HR policy and practices, but it's part of the fiber. It's woven into who you are. We don't ostracize someone. We don't, we're not going to all go into the break room and someone's going to have to eat in their office because they don't feel comfortable with the rest of us in the break room. You have to intentionally prioritize those things like that are important to you and the success of your business. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this presentation, and I understand we've got some questions, but before we go into questions, I want to stop the recording. If you're watching this video on YouTube and want to reach out, you can reach out to our office by calling 870-235-5033. And we'd be glad to take your call and set up a time to establish you as a client and visit with you about your small business needs. And if you're still on the recording, we're going to stop and we'll